Chapter 884. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. If all the previous disputes were surging undercurrents, then the appearance of Shangguanyu completely set off stormy waves in everyone's hearts. Everyone in the Tianling dynasty knew that the current emperor was seriously ill and in a coma, and had not woken up for 2 years. Many people even guessed that he might never wake up. Unexpectedly, not only did he wake up, but he also appeared at this time. Upon hearing this, Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat as she instinctively looked up. Although she had guessed that her father would appear today, she still couldn't suppress the joy and excitement in her heart when she saw him standing there with her own eyes. Seeing that familiar kind face, her mind went blank for a moment. Everything around her suddenly blurred at this moment, and only that one person occupied her sight and became clearer and clearer. Chu Liyue opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything. All that was left in her heart was nostalgia at this moment. She finally saw him again. At that time, she felt that there was no way out, and her father was controlled by them, so she finally decided to commit suicide. However, after her rebirth, she inadvertently learned that her father was actually still alive, but in a coma. Although she didn't know why Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing didn't kill her father and even tried to wake him up later, it was a blessing for Chu Liyue. For this reason, she had been waiting patiently for many days and nights until this day finally came. The scene seemed to be still. Even Yu Qisong and others didn't expect Shangguanyu's sudden appearance, and they all stood there in shock. Xiahou Rong reacted the fastest. Maybe it was because he had made a vow before, or because he was called out, but he was the first to realize what had happened. He looked up at the man standing above in a daze, and his lips trembled. Your Majesty? You're awake?" His words finally woke the others up. Shangguanyu looked up at the sky, narrowed his eyes, and sighed with emotion. "Yes, I'm awake. Why, are you disappointed?" "I don't dare." Xiahou Rong immediately knelt down. "Your humble servant is overjoyed that your Majesty has awakened. How can I be disappointed?" Jiang Yuqing also straightened his expression and knelt down to salute. "Congratulations, Your Majesty! Congratulations, Your Majesty!" This action finally moved the others. Everyone in the square in front of the palace fell to their knees. Their shouts shook the heavens. "Congratulations, Your Majesty! Long live His Majesty!" Shangguanyu lowered his eyes and looked at the people kneeling before him. His gaze was obscure. "Get up." Only then did everyone stand up one by one. However, with Shangguanyu's presence, the atmosphere had changed greatly compared to before. Most people chose to keep quiet, afraid that they would say or do something wrong and bring trouble to themselves. However, anyone with a brain would have reacted at this moment. How was today a wedding and coronation? This was clearly a trap set up by someone. They were just waiting for a good show to begin. On the surface, everything seemed calm and tranquil, but in reality, the undercurrent was already surging. Jiang Yuqing glanced at Shangguan and reminded her, "Well, His Majesty has woken up. Now your previous efforts are not in vain." Shangguan was stunned and quickly realized something. Her expression changed, and her eyes turned red instantly. "Father," she quickly ran forward, and 2 lines of tears flowed down. It seemed that she was crying tears of joy. One greets father. "Father, it's great that you're awake." As she spoke, she touched her face. Gu Ying murmured in self-pity, "Seeing father safe and sound, one's injury is worth it." Shangguanyu glanced at her quietly, but there was no heartache on his face. It seemed that he was indifferent. Immediately he asked faintly, "Look at this scene. Are you going to ascend the throne?" Shangguan's crying suddenly disappeared as if it had been forcibly cut off by someone. A trace of panic flashed across her face. She didn't even have time to wipe her tears and hurriedly said, No, because you haven't woken up, so, as an emperor, what he feared the most was that someone coveted his position. Shangguan had obviously violated the taboo. Speaking of which, the Tianling dynasty couldn't always be without a leader, and it was reasonable for her to ascend the throne. But in front of Shangguanyu, these words didn't sound right. After all, he wasn't dead yet. especially now that he had woken up. When did you wake up? I didn't know. I've neglected my duty. Shangguan Wan tried to salvage the situation for herself. However, this trick obviously didn't work on Shangguan Yu. It's all thanks to Master's was meticulous care that I could wake up so smoothly. Shangguan Wan was stunned. Master Zua? At this moment, another person walked out from behind Shangguan Yu. It was Zua Mingxi. Everyone was stunned for a moment. There was another Zua Mingxi beside Shangguan Wan. How could there be two of them? Who are you? Shangguan Wan's expression changed, and she shouted harshly. The Zua Mingxi, standing on top of the stairs, suddenly chuckled. Why are you shouting? Don't you all know me? As he spoke, he took off the mask on his face. He was handsome, and his eyes were as clear as ice. His smile was charming. It was Jian Fengqi. The moment Shangguan Wan saw Jian Fengqi, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Jiang Yuqing suddenly realized something, and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. Could it be? Standing on the 9th step, Shangguan Yu turned his eyes slightly and looked at Chu Liwei, smiling slightly. Miss Chu, right? Don't worry, I'll be your witness. Chu Liwei's nose twitched, and tears suddenly gushed out of her eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 885. Remember, Love Network, in 1 second and provide you with wonderful reading. She lowered her eyes and concealed the emotion of the cigarette butt. When she looked up again, her eyes were as clear and bright as obsidian that had just been soaked in water. She bent her knees and curtsied, moving her lips. Thank you, Your Majesty. Shangguan Yu looked at the woman standing below, and for some reason, his heart suddenly moved. In fact, when he pretended to be unconscious before, he had heard her voice. At that time, he only thought that this was a smart, quick-witted, decisive woman. Although her status was not high, she could still use all kinds of conditions to force Shangguan Wan and turn a disadvantage into an advantage. Now that he saw her, he realized that she was actually like this. For some reason, he felt that he had seen her somewhere before. He quickly recalled in his mind, but after thinking about it, he really had not seen her before. For nearly 2 years, he was basically sick in bed and stayed in Qingfeng Palace, day and night. He even rarely saw other people in the palace, not to mention people like Chu Liwei who came from outside Heaven's canopy. Probably because her eyebrows and eyes were too similar to Yu. Thinking of this, Shangguan Yu felt a burst of pain in his heart and looked at Chu Liwei with more benevolence. You worked so hard for Yu, and I should thank you. If you hadn't taken the initiative to reinvestigate the matter of that year, I'm afraid that many people might be free and happy for a long time. When he said the second half of the sentence, Shangguan Yu's tone was completely cold. Although he didn't scold him, his low and majestic tone was full of the emperor's power, which made people breathless. On the square in front of Langkuan Palace, everyone quieted down and kept quiet out of fear. Yuan, let me have a look at that letter. Hearing this, Yuan Wei immediately responded, stepped forward respectfully, and presented the secret letter with both hands. Shangguan Yu unfolded it and read it carefully. Xiahou Rong stood with his hands down, cold sweat constantly coming out of his forehead. His heart was beating wildly, and all the blood in his body was surging up, as if even his eardrums were about to burst. After a while, his back was all wet. Only a short period of time had passed, yet he actually felt that each day was like a year, and it was extremely torturous. Finally, in this suffocating atmosphere, Shangguan Yu finally opened his mouth. We have never written this letter. His words were clear and light, but they were like thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. He didn't write anything. That proved that this letter was indeed forged by someone else. No one answered. The air seemed to freeze inch by inch. Shangguan Yu looked at Xiahou Rong. The date on this letter is the 3rd of July. That day, I was discussing matters with Lord Xiahou in the Imperial Study, but for some reason I felt very tired, so I asked Lord Xiahou to leave first and go to the side room to rest. When I woke up again, it was already today. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Didn't they always say that because His Majesty heard about the death of the Empress concubine, He was extremely grief-stricken and was unable to get out of bed? Why did His Majesty say that he had been in a coma since the 3rd of July? One had to know that when the Empress concubine died, it was the 10th of July. At this time, who couldn't tell the problem in it? At that time, it was obvious that someone had done something to His Majesty, causing him to fall into a coma. At the same time, this fake document was forged to deceive the 13U to leave Westhill and then take the opportunity to assassinate the Empress concubine. It was self-evident who did this. Who else could it be but Xiahou Rong? Lord Xiahou, it seems that you didn't leave the imperial study immediately that day. Instead, you did a lot of tricks. Sheng Guanyu looked down at Xiahou Rong condescendingly, waved his sleeve lightly, and threw the secret letter to Xiahou Rong. Look at it yourself. Did you write this? Xiahou Rong finally couldn't bear it and knelt down with a plop. Your Majesty, you are so wise. I'm innocent. I really didn't do anything. Xiahou Rong cried out while secretly regretting it in his heart. The reason why he kept this letter was actually to use it as evidence to suppress Jianghu. Although they had done a lot of things together, they didn't trust each other very much. That was why he kept this thing as a precaution. However, I didn't expect Chu Luiwei to find this letter and His Majesty to personally identify it. Now he really couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the river. If he had known this, he should have destroyed this secret letter directly at the beginning. In the face of such irrefutable evidence, Xiahou Rong's defense and crying seemed very pale and powerless. Just now, when I was inside, I seemed to have heard Lord Xiahou swearing on the whole Xiahou mansion that if they really betrayed me, they would all die a horrible death. Xiahou Rong was suddenly stunned, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Your Majesty, Lord Xiahou, I didn't expect you to be so cruel to your own people, Sheng Guanyu said lightly and shook his head. After all, I misjudged you. Your Majesty, I really didn't do anything to let you down. Someone is framing me. Someone is framing me. Your Majesty, you are so wise. Xiahou Rong was shocked and hurriedly knelt forward. But before he reached the 9 steps, Sheng Guanyu had already opened his mouth. Xiahou Rong rebelled against his superiors and attempted to murder me. This is the first crime. Faking the secret edict and deceiving his superiors is the second crime. As punishment for these 2 crimes, Xiahou Rong's position as Grand Tutor will be removed and he will be demoted to a slave. He will be beheaded in public at noon tomorrow. In addition, Xiahou Mansion's 3 close relatives will be implicated. The 3 distant relatives, regardless of their gender, will all be sent to the frontier as slaves. They will never be able to return. Each and every word echoed clearly in front of the main hall. Xiahou Rong's movements suddenly paused and he knelt on the ground dejectedly. The last trace of blood on his face faded in an instant. In an instant, all the strength in his body seemed to have been sucked away, and even his breathing became difficult. It's over. With this sentence, the entire Xiahou family would be completely destroyed. His wives, concubines, his relatives, and clansmen. Being sent to the frontier as slaves was more terrible than being beheaded directly. It was really a fate worse than death. Your Majesty, please have mercy. For the sake of the Xiahou family's 100 years of loyalty, please spare my wives and children. If the Xiahou family was destroyed in his hands, he would become the sinner of the whole family. Sheng Guanyu looked at him with deep eyes. Xiahou Rong, you also know that the Xiahou family's 100 years of loyalty was defeated by you. After all, he had only himself to blame for all this. Xiahou Rong sat on the ground, his heart completely cold. Take him away. Sheng Guanyu waved his hand. Just when the people next to him were about to step forward, Xiahou Rong suddenly turned back and pointed at Jianghu fiercely, shouting with a ferocious look, "It's him. He and the 3rd princess forced me to do this." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 886. If you want to die, let's all die together. At this time, Xiahou Rong had obviously gone completely crazy. His Majesty's imperial edict had been issued, and the Xiahou clan would have no chance of turning things around. The entire clan, a total of thousands of people, would all be implicated. And the ones who caused all this were Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan Wan. Since he couldn't live, then, no one would have an easy time. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted. He stared coldly at Xiahou Rong. Lord Xiahou, watch your words. Don't drag other innocent people down just because you made a big mistake and implicate the entire clan. Shangguan Wan also panicked and hurriedly refuted. That's right. This matter has nothing to do with me. Xiahou Rong, don't talk nonsense. Innocent people? Spouting nonsense. Xiahou Rong laughed sarcastically. Jiang Yuqing, are you saying that you're innocent now? Weren't you the one who gave me the drug to His Majesty? Now you jump out to say that you're innocent and want to push all the blame to me to get rid of it, in your dreams. Xiahou Rong simply went all out and directly exposed everything. Everyone was shocked on the spot. The amount of information contained in this sentence was too much. The drug to His Majesty was given by Jiang Yuqing? Didn't that mean that Jiang Yuqing was also involved? If you hadn't promised to give me the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill after everything was done, I wouldn't have agreed to do these things for you. Now that everything has been exposed, no one can escape. He was doomed, so he had to drag a few people down with him. Jiang Yuqing's temples were throbbing, and he couldn't wait to immediately step forward and block Xiahou Rong's mouth. His face was livid, his fists clenched, and he suddenly sneered. Lord Xiahou, you said that I gave you the drug back then. Do you have any evidence? Empty words without any proof. If whatever you say is the truth, then wouldn't everyone here be at your mercy? Xiahou Rong froze and immediately clenched his teeth. Everything that happened back then was done very discreetly. Even that medicine was given to him by Jiang Yuqing in private. Other than the two of them, no one else could prove it. If Jiang Yuqing stubbornly refused to admit it, then it would really be difficult to convict him. Furthermore, my Jiang family is a large Tianling family, and I'm about to marry the princess. What reason do I have to spend so much effort to harm His Majesty first, and then the princess? Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth in anger. This Jiang Yuqing was truly treacherous. This wasn't the only thing he had done back then. Now, he had turned hostile and refused to admit it. That 9 clouds yuan recovery pill was given to me by you as a reward. You dare to deny it? You have to know that after the Empress concubine's death, her funeral was handled by you and the 3rd princess. Only the 2 of you can obtain the 9 heavens yuan returning pill. Oh, since that's the case, could Lord Xiahou please take out the 9 clouds yuan recovery elixir to prove that you're not lying? Jiang Yuqing asked back. Xiahou Rong had just lost this item a few days ago, so it was impossible for him to take it out now. Sure enough, when Xiahou Rong heard this, he immediately choked, and his face turned red. You know that, it seems that Lord Xiahou can't take it out. Jiang Yuqing interrupted him. In that case, please don't make irresponsible remarks again, Lord Xiahou, it's here. Before he could finish speaking, a clear voice suddenly sounded from the side. Jiang Yuqing's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw Chu Luiwei smiling as she took out a black wooden box. The moment he saw that box, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly sank. Wasn't this thing stolen? Why was it here with Chu Luiwei? He recalled that the previous secret letter was also stolen from the Xiahou residence. Could it be that all these things were done by Chu Luiwei alone? But she was clearly still in the Dahuang swamp some time ago. How could... This should be what you're looking for, right? Chu Luiwei shook the box in her hand and smiled meaningfully. I can prove that this thing was indeed plundered from Lord Xiahou's study. Because she had already taken out the secret letter earlier, everyone was very convinced by her words. The 9 clouds yuan recovery pill was the only 9th grade essence pill left behind by Taizu. It had always been carefully enshrined by the Tianling royal family. Previously, His Majesty had indeed bestowed it to the Empress for safekeeping. After the Empress's death, these items were all handled by the 3rd princess and Jiang Yuqing. Such an important item like the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill actually appeared in Chu Luiwei's hands. Clearly, it had been taken away before. This just happened to confirm Xiahou Rong's previous words. Jiang Yuqing used the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill as a reward to help him drug his Majesty and forge a document. Chu Luiwei handed the wooden box to Yuan Wei. Your Majesty, please take a look. Yuan Wei took the item and carefully opened the box. A strong medicinal fragrance instantly spread out. Shangguan Yu's expression changed slightly. This is indeed the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill. He looked at Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing, what else do you have to say? Jiang Yuqing gritted his teeth. I didn't take good care of it, so this 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill was stolen. However, what Lord Xiahou said just now was indeed slander. Your Majesty, please investigate clearly. He was determined to deny it to the end. Xiahou Rong was extremely resentful and began to search in his mind. He wanted to directly kill Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan Wan as well. But after thinking about it, he was shocked to realize that he really couldn't produce any strong evidence. Jiang Yuqing had always been cautious and didn't leave any traces. Every time they discussed things, there was no one else present. Even now that the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill had been taken out, he still said that it was his lack of supervision that led to the theft and that he didn't send it out himself. Apart from this mouth, Xiahou Rong couldn't do anything to Jiang Yuqing. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. He pointed at the two and scolded, Good, good, good. You don't want to admit it now, right? Then I'd like to ask, if you didn't do anything to His Majesty, then why did you guard Qingfeng Hall so strictly in the past 2 years and even sent 3 celestial physicians to take care of it in turn? If this isn't a guilty conscience, then what is it? As he said this, he suddenly looked at the crowd and sternly shouted, Let's go. Xiong Yishui. Xialang, do you dare to stand up and tell everyone what's going on with His Majesty's body? Right, and Zuomingshi. The 3 of you have been responsible for taking care of His Majesty from the beginning. Now you can at least say a few words, right? From the moment Shangguan Yu came out, Xiong Yishui and the others had been completely shocked. The 3 of them had indeed taken turns to take care of His Majesty, but they had never seen any signs of His Majesty waking up before. Now that they thought about it, maybe His Majesty had already woken up. Suddenly being pointed at, the faces of the 3 of them became very ugly, and they stammered and couldn't say anything. Jian Fengqi chuckled and said, Since the 3 of you don't want to say anything, why don't I tell everyone? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 887. Jian Fengqi flung the mask in his hand and smiled flirtatiously. Speaking of which, I've been taking care of His Majesty for a long time. Although I'm using Lord Zuomingshi's name, it's for His Majesty's own good. I believe that everyone here is loyal to His Majesty and won't mind, right? This hat was too big, so no one dared to say no. The fact that he could stand by His Majesty's side and walk out of Longquan Hall with His Majesty proved that His Majesty trusted him greatly. How could others say anything? Actually, we have to start with the 3rd princess. Jian Fengqi said with a smile. I still remember clearly that when I entered the palace as Lord Zuo for the first time, I happened to meet the 3rd princess. Does the 3rd princess still remember what you said at that time? Shangguan Wan's face turned pale. She didn't even know when Jian Fengqi had pretended to be Zuomingshi. How could she remember what she said? But she had always trusted Zuomingshi. She didn't hide anything from him about His Majesty. At that time, the 3rd princess was very worried about His Majesty, so she asked me to reduce the dosage of medicine and find a way to wake His Majesty up. Jian Fengqi applauded sincerely. Clap, clap, clap. The 3rd princess's filial piety can be seen by heaven and earth. In order to wake His Majesty up again, she was even willing to reduce the dosage of medicine for His Majesty. Based on this point alone, no one here can compare to her, right? Jian Fengqi's words were like a sharp sword that directly pierced Shangguan Wan's hypocrisy. Her strong and calm expression finally cracked. I didn't, she subconsciously retorted, but her expression was panicked and her footsteps were unsteady. He was right. Shangguan Wan finally couldn't hold back. She gritted her teeth and said hatefully to Zuomingshi beside her, Zuomingshi, I trusted you so much. How dare you deceive and betray me? If he hadn't teamed up with Jian Fengqi, this wouldn't have happened. But I don't know anything. Zhuo Mingxi wanted to say something, but he felt guilty and didn't know what to say. It was true that he did not know that Jian Fengqi had been secretly using his name to enter the palace, but he was not completely unaware. During this period of time, he occasionally felt that he seemed to have become more sleepy than before, and his mind seemed to have become muddled. Especially when it was his turn to be on duty, this feeling became even more intense. He vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he didn't dare to say anything. He was afraid that if Shangguan Wan and the others found out, they would immediately kill him to silence him. But he didn't expect that he still couldn't hide it. And today, things had turned out this way. Shangguan Wan's heart was filled with hatred, but she also knew that it was useless to say these things now. The only way was to get rid of these things as much as possible and prove his innocence. But how could it be that easy? She thought back to when she was in the Clear Wind Palace. She had taken advantage of the fact that her imperial father had not regained consciousness and had said many things without concealing anything. If imperial father were to find out about it, oh right, there's also Jiang Yuqing. Jian Fengqi's eyes turned slightly, and the corners of his lips curled up into a wicked smile. His eyes were full of sarcasm. Later on, you also said something similar. I still remember it clearly. The expression on Jiang Yuqing's face seemed to have frozen. His eyebrows, eyes, mouth, and nose were all terrifyingly cold and stiff. The previous scenes kept flashing in his mind. No wonder he felt that Zhuo Mingxi was a little strange some time ago. It turned out that it was because there was indeed a change of people. When he saw Jian Fengqi coming out with his Imperial Majesty just now, he felt very uneasy. Now it really exploded. No matter whether Jian Fengqi was telling the truth or not, he and Shangguan Wan couldn't deny it. After all, he was standing beside his Imperial Majesty now. What Jian Fengqi said now obviously had his Imperial Majesty's permission, and even, he was representing his Imperial Majesty's position. The number of times this young master has entered the palace is actually not many. But whenever I meet the two of you, I have to talk about the matter of using medicine back then. Wasn't that what Lord Xiaohe was talking about just now? What, you still refuse to admit it? The evidence was already in their faces, but they still refused to admit it. How thick-skinned. Dead silence. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan Wan both fell silent. This was no longer a matter that could be cleared of suspicion by denying it. After all, it was very likely that his Imperial Majesty also knew about many of these things. If he had already woken up, then many things were already set in stone. But just when everyone thought that the truth was out and they were finally going to admit their guilt, Jiang Yuqing suddenly spoke. I really didn't know about His Imperial Majesty being poisoned back then. One told me that His Imperial Majesty had taken too much medicine in order to nurse his body back then. That was why he had been in a coma for so long. We did discuss about using less medicine for a long time, but I didn't know it was poison. Hearing this, Shangguan Wan gradually widened her eyes in shock and looked at Jiang Yuqing in disbelief. What did you say? Jiang Yuqing looked apologetic. I'm sorry I was deceived by you before, so I helped you. But now that things are clear, I can't speak up for you anymore. You have to bear the corresponding responsibility for what you've done. Chu Luiwei was secretly amazed. If it weren't for the inappropriate atmosphere now, she would have applauded Jiang Yuqing's ability to refute. She had seen what it meant to reverse right and wrong today. Seeing that the matter had been exposed, he took the initiative to abandon Shangguan Wan and only wanted to protect himself. But then again, this kind of ruthlessness and cruelty was his usual style. How could Shangguan Wan be his opponent? Sure enough, after hearing these words, Shangguan Wan completely exploded after a short period of shock. Jiang Yuqing, what are you talking about? You want to push all the blame onto me now, don't you? But since you're heartless, don't blame me for being heartless. Shangguan Wan took a step forward, walked to the middle, and said in a sharp voice, what Xiahou Rong said just now was right. Everything was ordered by Jiang Yuqing. He was the one who attacked father and transferred the 13 U guards away. He was also the one who secretly sent people to attack the Chongshu pavilion. He was the mastermind of all these things. The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead bulged. He lowered his voice and said coldly, "You're confused." But Shangguan didn't care. She had lost all face today and was already emotionally unstable. Coupled with Jian Fengqi and the others' provocation, she couldn't bear it anymore. Anyway, she couldn't deny it, and it would be difficult for her to make a comeback in the future. Not to mention that she had no fate with the throne, she might not even be able to keep her identity as the third princess. After today, it was still unknown whether she would live or die. At this time, Jiang Yuqing actually took the initiative to betray her, so she had no mercy for him. She stared at Jiang Yuqing with scarlet eyes and sneered, "What, you don't want to admit it? Don't forget, you were the one who drugged Shangguan Yu with the energy-dissipating powder for 3 years. Finally, you attacked her on the eve of the wedding and imprisoned her in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Digression, the last 2 updates may be a little late, about 1:30. Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Iowa. Chapter 888. She was such a smart person. If she wasn't someone close to him, how could she have fallen into a trap and died in the end? Shangguan laughed crazily. Because of anger and resentment, her facial features were distorted and her eyes were scarlet. She looked like an evil ghost. Don't forget that you have a share of the pain she suffered before she died. The sharp voice pierced through the sky, making everyone's heart turn cold. As soon as the voice fell, everyone's face was filled with horror. Shangguan, what did she just say? She said that it was Jiang Yuqing who killed the crown princess. He even planned for it for 3 years. The crown princess didn't die from the so-called qi deviation during cultivation. She was forced to a dead end by them and finally chose to commit suicide. In just a few words, a shocking secret was revealed. Even Yu Qisong and the others who had already guessed that it was Jiang Yuqing who killed the crown princess were shocked when they heard this. Shangguan Yu suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest, and he staggered. Yuan Wei and Jian Fengqi immediately went forward to support him. "Your Majesty, you have to take care." Yuan Wei wanted to persuade more, but when the words reached his mouth, he didn't know how to say it. The crown princess had always been His Majesty's favorite child. Since young, His Majesty had poured a lot of effort into the crown princess. Usually, even if the crown princess suffered a small injury, His Majesty would always feel distressed. Whether it was the coming-of-age ceremony, the imperial court, or the big wedding later, His Majesty always wanted to give the crown princess the best for everything related to her. And that child whom he had doted on and was afraid of suffering even the slightest grievance, was now being plotted against and killed. How could he bear it? Jian Fengqi watched from the side, and the smile on his face had already faded. Even when His Majesty knew that it was Shangguan who killed him, His Majesty didn't show such an expression. It could be seen how big of a blow Shangguan Yu's death was to him. "Your Majesty," Shangguan Yu waved his hand and slowly broke away from the two's support. However, he seemed to have aged a lot in an instant, and his face seemed to be covered with a layer of gray. He looked at Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing, suppressing the huge grief and anger in his heart, and asked word by word, "I only ask, did she do anything wrong to you? You actually want to harm her like this? When Yu was plotted against His Majesty's death, His Majesty's heart. His Majesty's heart ached. To this day, it was just a matter of a few sentences, but hidden within it was how much pain Yu had gone through. Burying all the torture she had endured. Even if these people died 10,000 times His Majesty's estes. She shrieked, "His teat hurt you her, as if I was the one who had wronged her. But what she gave me was nothing but charity. Who cared about that? Fathers, I'm also your daughter, but have you ever looked me in the eye since I was young? When I didn't have enough to eat or warm clothes, and when I was bullied in the palace, did you ever think of me as yours, daughter? You only have Shangguan Yu in your eyes." Shangguan's voice trembled, as if she wanted to vent all her years of accumulated resentment. Her only needs to wave her hand, and she can get whatever she wants easily. She has a magnificent and spacious palace and a high position. She can even take away the man I've liked for many years with just a word. What do I have? If I don't please her and rely on her, I'll have nothing. She's had enough of this lowly life of having to rely on others. Therefore, she wanted to snatch Huayong Palace, the throne, and even Jianghu. Shang Guanyu looked at Shang Guanwan, who seemed to have gone crazy, with a cold and solemn face and a pained look in his eyes. Even if I've neglected you, you should have come to me. Why did you put all the blame on you? You said it was charity, and if you didn't want it, you could have just said so. You enjoyed her kindness on one hand, but on the other hand, you were jealous and resentful of her. What did she do wrong? In the end, was jealous of Shang Guanyu, so she couldn't bear to see her living well and tried every means to harm her. After doing so many wrong things, she still blamed Shang Guanyu for her betrayal and hurt. She was really unreasonable. Shang Guanwan choked and couldn't say a word. Her chest rose and fell violently, but after a while, she suddenly laughed. See, you're still thinking about her at this time. Unfortunately, she's dead. She's completely dead. No matter how sad these people are, Shang Guanyu's will never come back to life. Even if everything was exposed today, she thought to herself, even if Shang Guanyu was exposed, she thought to herself. She then looked at Jiang Yuqing with a tinge of craziness in her eyes. Yuqing, since I've already admitted it, you should admit it too. Anyway, we did all those things together, didn't we? See, so many people like her and love her. Even though she's been dead for so long, there are still people running around for her just to ask for an answer. But we have nothing. Only I like you, do you know that? Only I. As she spoke, she reached out and wanted to pull Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing silently took a step back and avoided her hand as he expressionlessly said, Shang Guanwan, you're really crazy. You treated you like her biological sister, but you treated her like this. I was wrong about you. Shang Guanwan was dazed and then realized that he still refused to admit it. She stared at him for a while and laughed in self-mockery. I'm really stupid. I actually believed you. You missed her for 10 years, but didn't you do it to her without hesitation in the end? What am I? Jiang Yuqing, this person, can even do it to the woman he liked for so many years. Not to mention the others. I, Shang Guanwan, am actually just a chess piece for him. Thinking back on everything that happened these few years, it's like a joke. Jiang Yuqing cupped his fists toward Shang Guanyu and said, Your Majesty, I know that my explanation is very weak, but I really don't know about these things. Jiang Yuqing, we've already reached this stage, but you're still unwilling to admit it, right? Chu Luiyue suddenly asked. Jiang Yuqing paused and looked straight at her. If I didn't do it, why should I admit it? Shang Guanwan's mind isn't clear now, and her words can't be trusted. Oh! Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. If her words can't be trusted, then what about mine? Jiang Yuqing was dumbfounded. Chu Luiyue suddenly took a step forward, and there seemed to be flames burning in her eyes. Swish, she raised the Tianling scepter high and then lowered it. The dragon's eyes shone and pointed straight ahead, full of majesty. I forgot to introduce myself, double quotes. I'm Shang Guanyu. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 889. This Empress, Shang Guanyu. This sentence was clear and powerful. It was just a few words, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Too many things had happened today. Explosive news came one after another. Just when everyone thought that they had become numb from the continuous bombardment of all kinds of secret news, Chu Luiyue's words instantly set off huge waves in their hearts. It was like a blow to the head. Everyone was shocked on the spot again. This was even more impactful than the previous ones added together. It wasn't just Jiang Yuqing and the others. Shang Guanyu, Jian Fengqi, Yu Qi Song, Everyone who had previously agreed to join forces to deal with Jiang Yuqing and Shang Guanwan today was also shocked at this moment. No one expected that Chu Luiwei would jump out and say such a thing when things were getting out of hand. There was a frightening silence in the field. At this moment, it seemed like even breathing had become extra redundant. Everyone looked at Chu Luiwei with their mouths agape. They still couldn't digest what she said just now. The mask on Jiang Yuqing's face finally cracked at this moment. He stared at Chu Luiwei in shock as he stuttered, which was rare of him. What did you say? Who are you? Chu Luiwei's red lips curved into a smile. This smile was filled with a myriad of magnificence. It was incomparably noble. In an instant, it was as high as the sun in the clouds and unattainable. In an instant, it was brilliant and dazzling. It carried a noble aura. It made people unconsciously want to submit to her. Everyone's attention was unconsciously attracted by the woman on the field. She was tall and slender. She was dressed in red, and her fine black hair was tied up simply. It was simple and neat to the extreme. She clearly didn't do anything, but the aura on her body had undergone a huge change in an instant. At this moment, she was like a pearl covered in dust that had finally wiped off the layer of dust, blooming with the light that originally belonged to her. The same thought flashed through almost everyone's mind. This is her. This is Chu Luiwei. No, perhaps it should be Shang Guanyu. She stood with her back straight, one hand gripping the heavenly writ scepter tightly as she pointed it at Jiang Yuqing. Every word was like the judgment of a saint. Jiang Yuqing, are you very disappointed that this consort didn't die? If you're still unwilling to admit to everything you've done, then today, I'll be the last witness. Who would have thought that things would develop to this point? Princess didn't die. She actually didn't die. The woman who was rumored to have completely disappeared 2 years ago had actually returned? In the blink of an eye, countless thoughts flashed through Jiang Yuqing's mind. No, that's impossible. Back then he had specially sent people to investigate Chu Luiwei's background, and everything had shown that there was no problem. How did she suddenly become Shang Guanyu? You're not her. Jiang Yuqing almost immediately denied it. She died 2 years ago. There's absolutely no other possibility. Chu Luiwei, don't play tricks here. Do you know what kind of crime it is to impersonate princess? Although Jiang Yuqing refuted it verbally, he wasn't sure either. If Chu Luiwei was really Shang Guanyu, then many things could be explained. That similar eyebrows and expression, that shocking talent and strength, and the heavenly writ scepter. He was wondering why the heavenly writ scepter was so close to Chu Luiwei. If she was Shang Guanyu, then there was nothing to doubt. Chu Luiwei lifted her chin slightly, her gaze cold as if she was looking at an ant. Are you doubting this consort's identity? You're clearly just an abandoned daughter from a small empire outside heaven's canopy. Jiang Yuqing immediately retorted as he stared at Chu Luiwei's face. Your appearance, figure, age. Everything is right here. There's no mistaking it. You definitely can't be Shang Guanyu. That's right. That bitch is already dead. How can she still be alive? Shang Guanwan, who was beside him, could not help but shout. She pointed at Chu Luiwei with resentment in her eyes. You're just lying. On the day of the wedding, she had already fallen to such a state. She thought that she was already battered and exhausted. Who knew that Chu Luiwei actually dared to call her Shang Guanyu? Shang Guanwan wasn't afraid of everything she had done before being exposed in public. She also didn't care about the contemptuous gazes of these people. But she absolutely couldn't allow Shang Guanyu to be alive. Absolutely not. At this moment, everyone was looking at Chu Luiwei with different gazes. Shock, suspicion, surprise, nervousness. Are you really you? Shang Guanyu stared at Chu Luiwei without blinking and finally couldn't help but ask. In fact, the moment she opened her mouth, he had already confirmed in his heart that this was his you. In this world, only you would have such a look. No wonder he felt very close to her when he first saw her from afar. It turned out that, however, the more he missed her, the more he longed for her, the more he was afraid that all this was a dream. Shang Guanyu's tone was careful, as if he was afraid of disturbing something and breaking the dreamlike scene in front of him. There seemed to be something surging in Chu Liyue's heart. She choked in her throat, but there was a bright smile on her lips. "Father, it's me." One sentence was enough. The tip of Shangguan Yu's nose twitched, and his eyes lit up immediately. It's you. It's my. Impossible." Shangguan Wan's heart was full of hatred. "Shangguan Yu has the Tianjing Yuan meridian, and you just have the Daijing. How can you be her?" Chu Liyue turned her eyes slightly and looked at Shangguan Wan and Jianghu, who were almost crazy. She was very clear that the two of them were not the only ones who were suspicious. "You want me to prove my identity? Then I'll satisfy you." She suddenly let out a clear shout. "Long Yuan sword. Buzz." With a command, heaven and earth shook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 890. Dark clouds quickly gathered in the originally clear sky, forming a huge black vortex above everyone's head. The wind swirled the clouds and covered the sky. In an instant, the sky darkened. Then, a ferocious and vast aura suddenly descended. The Tianling scepter in Chu Liyue's hand seemed to have sensed something, and it suddenly vibrated. She raised her wrist, and the Tianling scepter quickly flew up and landed back on the black obsidian. The golden light in the dragon's eyes shone in all directions. Brilliant and colorful. Rumble. Following this low and powerful explosion, everyone's hearts trembled, and they all looked up. They saw a huge black shadow breaking out of the crazily swirling dark clouds and slowly descending. It was a sword. It was black all over and looked ancient and majestic. Only in the middle was an extremely thin silver groove, and one could vaguely see icy blue lightning flashing and swimming in it. Tianlei's aura was impressive. The hilt of the sword was also black, and the dragon engravings on it were clearly visible and lifelike. As it gradually descended, a hole was instantly torn in the sky. From top to bottom, it was straight and hard. The sharp and terrifying sword aura, wrapped in a biting cold aura, shocked the world. That's the Long Yuan sword. Elder Chen Ku was the first to react. His eyes widened, and his old face was filled with shock and disbelief. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. The Long Yuan sword. It's really the Long Yuan sword? Is this the supreme treasure sword that was rumored to have been forged by the great ancestor himself and used to open up new territories and create the Tianling dynasty? Shangguan Yu also stared at the sword in the air and said in a deep voice, "That's right. That's right. That's indeed the Long Yuan sword. I didn't expect that I would be able to see the Long Yuan sword being brought out of the Tianling god realm in my lifetime." Even Shangguan Yu, who had seen countless storms and waves, couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes when he saw this scene. For thousands of years, the people of the Tianling dynasty had always wanted to bring the Long Yuan sword back to the world, but they had failed time and time again. No matter who it was, no matter what method they used, it seemed like they couldn't do it. Gradually, this became an obsession in their hearts. In the end, it was a precious item left behind by the Taizu, and it was also the origin tool that the Taizu valued the most. Its significance was extraordinary. Therefore, even though they failed time and time again, the people of the Tianling royal family never gave up and kept trying. Over the long years, countless people had been injured because of this, and some had even lost their lives. Even Shangguan Yu had attempted to enter the Tianling god realm back then. Unfortunately, he had returned with injuries. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that such a sacred object that only existed in legends would actually appear before their eyes. Then, under the gazes of countless pairs of eyes, the Dragon Abyss sword flew into Chu Liyue's hand. She gripped the hilt of the sword and injected a stream of force into it. A sword hum rang out. It was like the roar of a dragon. At the same time, she raised her arm and raised her sword high. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to crazily gather towards the Long Yuan sword. Claps of thunder could be heard. It was almost deafening. Long Yuan sword, fall. Chu Luiyue shouted. The black sword in her hand slashed down instantly. In an instant, it was as if an invisible hand had torn the sky apart. The swirling clouds suddenly split from the middle and quickly dispersed to both sides. The storm abruptly stopped, and then transformed into two violent waves that spiraled downwards like swimming dragons. Strong winds blew everywhere. The sky above the Longquan Palace actually started to collapse silently. Inch by inch, darkness engulfed the void at a speed visible to the naked eye. The power of the Long Yuan sword was evident. The Tianling scepter instantly shone brightly. A faint golden light transformed into a barrier that enveloped the Longquan Palace. The black space collapsed and finally stopped at the edge of the barrier. However, the people standing below could still not help but feel that tyrannical and terrifying pressure. Everyone was shocked and shocked. So, this is the true pressure of the Long Yuan sword. No wonder the Tianling royal family had been trying to invite it out for the past 1,000 years. Once such a divine artifact was used, what was there to be afraid of? In the next instant, a black sword aura flew out from the Long Yuan sword. It went straight for Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing's heart sank fiercely. Danger! Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he immediately leaped into the air. He quickly retreated to the back. If this attack landed on him, the consequences would be unimaginable. As a Stage 7 warrior, his combat power was not considered weak. In fact, compared to most of the people present, he was still considered a strong one. However, at this moment, facing the rapidly approaching sword aura, a deep sense of fear and panic surged in Jiang Yuqing's heart. Hence, from the beginning, he directly mobilized all his force and used his fastest speed to retreat without holding back. In the blink of an eye, he had already retreated tens of feet. However, although Jiang Yuqing was fast, the Long Yuan sword aura was even faster. Everyone only saw a black sword aura piercing through the air. In the next moment, it had already caught up to Jiang Yuqing. At this moment, the strong wind blew Jiang Yuqing's clothes, and his black hair danced wildly in the wind. He could almost feel the pain between his eyebrows as if it was about to be cut by the sharp sword aura. He did not hesitate to set up a barrier in front of him. Bang! The moment the black sword aura touched his barrier, a crisp sound was heard. It was actually his barrier that was pierced through in an instant and completely shattered. Jiang Yuqing was even more terrified. The Long Yuan sword aura chased after him with irresistible force and could be said to be unstoppable. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to block it, not to mention other things. Alarm bells rang in Jiang Yuqing's heart. He retreated again and again. However, how could the current him be a match for the Long Yuan sword? In just the blink of an eye, the distance between the two rapidly shortened. The powerful aura almost crushed Jiang Yuqing in all directions. Jiang Yuqing only felt that the surrounding space seemed to be gradually solidifying. Every movement of his began to consume more force than before. His eyes stared fixedly at the black sword aura that was charging straight at him. His heart almost stopped beating. Suddenly, he felt a piercing pain between his eyebrows, and sticky blood slowly flowed down. Jiang Yuqing gritted his teeth, and an extremely cold aura flashed across his eyes. Just as he was about to make a move, the sword aura arrived. Immediately, the sword aura was deflected and directly slashed across Jiang Yuqing's left arm. All they heard was the sound of bones breaking and flesh being sliced apart. Then, everyone saw something flying down from the sky. It crashed onto the ground. Looking closely, it was none other than half of Jiang Yuqing's arm. His forearm had been cut off by Chu Luiyue's sword. Bang! Jiang Yuqing suffered a violent impact and also fell heavily onto the ground. He dragged dozens of feet on the white marble floor. A long bloody mark was drawn. Chu Luiyue pointed her sword at him, and a cold smile appeared on her lips. If I can cut off your arm once, I can cut it off a second time. Now, do you admit it or not? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 891. There was complete silence all around. At this moment, everything in the world seemed to have stopped. All the light shone on the woman in red. Her clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. Holding the dragon abyss sword in her hand, she shocked the world. Her jade-like eyes were burning with a strong desire to fight. It was as if she wanted to burn all the grudges of the past into ashes. For today, she had waited for too long. And that clear shout was like a sudden clap of thunder, clearly reaching everyone's ears. It shook their minds. Her body was wrapped in a shocking pressure, as if she was a god of war who had returned from hell. Intense pain came from all parts of his body, and the half of his arm that was cut off was bleeding profusely. In a short while, the ground under Jianghu was dyed red with blood, and he looked battered and exhausted. Chu Luiyue had only used one sword, and Jianghu was beaten black and blue, unable to retaliate at all. Everyone was extremely shocked when they saw this scene, and they finally couldn't help but gasp in shock. Chu Luiyue and Jianghu were clearly several levels apart, but with the Dragon Abyss sword in hand, Chu Luiyue could actually crush Jianghu so easily. The Dragon Abyss sword was actually so powerful and terrifying. At this moment, no one dared to doubt the authenticity of that sword. Other than the real Dragon Abyss sword, what other object in this world could achieve such divine power? Chu Luiyue's sword cut off half of Jianghu arm, and also cut off everyone's doubts. Jianghu mind was blank, and only that terrible pain came from all parts of his body, almost drowning him. He supported himself up with difficulty and raised his eyes to look at the woman in front of him. She was tall and slender, and her back was straight. With the Dragon Abyss sword in her hand, all the light in the world seemed to be concentrated in her eyes. How familiar was this scene? He was in a trance for a moment. 2 years ago, it was the same situation. She resolutely chose to commit suicide and destroyed Shangguan Wan's Yuan Meridian and one of his arms. After that, he spent a lot of energy trying to find a way to get himself back to normal. However, not long after, the same thing happened again. It was her. It really was her. At this moment, Jianghu knew better than anyone else that the woman in front of him was indeed Shangguan Yu. She didn't die. Instead, she returned with a bone-deep hatred. She returned all the betrayal and pain she had suffered. No wonder he felt that she was very familiar at first sight. No wonder when he interacted with her, he always felt an inexplicable sense of alienation. No wonder he mistook her for someone else when she was standing on the bustling street with only a side of her face exposed. He even thought that he had fallen in love with her. On the eve of the wedding, he invited her to the zither room by the lake to express his feelings. But it turned out that she was her. At this moment, the truth was revealed. At this moment, all sorts of feelings intertwined. Jianghu had never felt that he was such a joke before. When he was tossing and turning in bed for her, when he was emotionally moved by her, when he said, "I want to marry you," to her, what was she thinking? Until today, when he thought of all the things that happened in the past, it was extremely absurd. It was like a loud slap to Jianghu face. I see. Jianghu chest shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale and dispirited. However, his eyes were still fixed on Chu Luiyue. This face was so similar to Shangguan Yu's in the past. However, this gaze was completely different from her in the past. At that time, she was noble, gentle, intelligent, and generous. She seemed to have endless patience for everyone. Her eyes were always bright, dazzling like the bright sun, and people could only look up to her. But now, after experiencing pain, she was tenacious and resolute. Her every move was swift and agile. Even though she was smiling, there seemed to always be a coldness that couldn't be separated between her brows. It was as if a thick wall had been built, and no one could walk through it. Jianghu suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. "It's really you?" Back then, he had planned for a long time and used a full 3 years to finally make a move on her, in order to ensure that nothing would go wrong. But he didn't expect that she would still be able to escape alive, change her appearance, and return again. He thought that his plan was flawless, but it turned out that it was a failure from the beginning. How could this be? Seeing the Dragon Abyss sword fall and hearing Jiang Yuqing finally admit it, Shangguanwan's heart suddenly surged with endless hatred. She looked at Chu Luiwei in disbelief. She still couldn't accept all of this. The scenes that had happened in the past few months kept replaying in her mind. At that time, she only felt that Chu Luiwei and Shangguanyu looked a little similar, and she subconsciously didn't like them. Later, she found that Chu Luiwei's talent and strength far exceeded hers, and it made her unhappy. After the trip to the Dahuang swamp, she saw Chu Luiwei as a thorn in her side, and she couldn't wait for her to die outside forever. She originally thought that everything had gone smoothly and that she could finally have some peace and quiet. However, she didn't expect Chu Luiwei to come back safe and sound. Chu Luiwei even made an agreement with a legendary fiend, plucked the dancing lotus, and became much stronger. Today, it was directly exposed that she was Shangguanyu. Shangguanwan suddenly rushed forward like a madwoman, and her expression was ferocious. "I'm going to kill you. You deserve to die. You ruined my wedding and robbed me of my throne. You bitch, you should have gone to hell long ago." Chu Luiwei's eyes flickered and she suddenly laughed. "Shangguanwan, shouldn't I be the one saying that?" Back then, it was these two people who had joined forces to destroy everything she had, took everything she had, and caused her endless pain. Now, she was only back to take back everything that belonged to her. Shangguanwan, what right did she have to say such things? Shangguanwan didn't care. She seemed to have gone crazy, and the force around her surged wildly. That resentful and jealous expression made her already scarred face even more twisted and terrifying. At first glance, she looked like a malicious spirit. However, she had just taken 2 steps when Chu Luiwei flipped her wrist, and the Dragon Abyss sword in her hand pointed directly at her. A black spatial crack appeared in midair. Buzz. Following that, there was a loud explosion. A formless and terrifying pressure suddenly swept out from the Dragon Abyss sword. The void was compressed by this force, and it started to distort and collapse inch by inch, crushing toward Shangguanwan. Shangguanwan knew that something was wrong, and a trace of panic and fear flashed across her eyes. She immediately wanted to dodge to the side. However, she was shocked to find that her body was already unable to move. The space around her had already been enveloped by the heavy pressure of the Dragon Abyss sword. Shangguanwan felt as if there was a heavy mountain pressing down on her shoulders, and she immediately knelt down. Both of her knees were crushed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 892. Her flesh and bones hit the ground with a dull thud, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking. It made one's scalp go numb. Shangguanwan's face, which was originally red from anger, instantly turned pale. The last trace of blood had also completely faded away. She couldn't withstand this terrifying force. As she knelt down, her body fell forward and she immediately spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. She was already injured, and now with this blow, she was even more dispirited and listless. She fell to the ground, and her hands were rubbed with bloody marks, which were burning with pain. The originally clean and tidy white jade bricks were stained with scarlet bloodstains, which looked hideous. Shangguanwan knew that it was her blood. She wanted to get up, but she found it extremely difficult. Every inch of her flesh and blood seemed to be suppressed by a great force, which made it difficult for her to even breathe. In the silence, the sound of footsteps could be heard from the front. Shangguanwan was kneeling on the ground. When she heard this sound, she subconsciously looked up. What entered her sight was a pair of black boots and red clothes. "Since you can't stand properly, then kneel and talk." Chu Luiwei's voice came from above. Her tone was so light, but in Shangguanwan's ears, it was no different from deep mockery and contempt. Shangguanwan's blood rushed to her heart, and she clenched her silver teeth. "What are you doing?" She was just about to force herself to get up when she suddenly felt a chill on her neck. Her body collapsed again. Chu Luiwei was holding Long Yuan and holding it against her neck. A bone-chilling coldness emanated from the thick and heavy sword. The sharp blade of the sword was wrapped in dense killing intent. It was as if as long as she dared to move, This sword would immediately take her life. Chu Luiyue tilted her head, then suddenly leaned over and stared at Shangguan. The corners of her lips curled up, and the corners of her eyes and brows were incomparably sincere. She said word by word, "Speaking of which, this princess has to thank you. If it weren't for you, wouldn't this princess have to marry Jianghu? That would be terrible." You! Shangguan was so angry that she didn't know what to say for a moment. When Jianghu, who was at the side, heard this, his expression suddenly darkened as his pale lips moved, but he didn't say anything. It was as if his heart had been ruthlessly stabbed by a knife, and it was a sharp pain. He looked at the woman not far away. Her eyes were smiling and her expression was relaxed. Her words were clearly sincere. She really felt that it was a great blessing not being with him. All the gentleness and affection in those eyes had completely disappeared. He originally thought that it would be replaced by utter hatred. But that wasn't the case. She looked at him as if she was looking at a stranger. Other than the anger and resentment of being betrayed, there was not the slightest bit of unnecessary entanglement and infatuation. Jianghu looked down and suddenly laughed in self-mockery. That's right, she had never been moved by him, so how could she have such feelings? It's just... Shangguan suddenly recalled that Yang Qin had once told her that Chu Luiyue had taken the Long Yuan sword out of the Tianling god realm. However, she didn't believe it at that time and sent the royal family's elders into the Tianling god realm to check. They also said that the Long Yuan sword was still inside. She really couldn't figure out how Chu Luiyue took the Long Yuan sword out and perfectly covered up this matter. However, she didn't have the time or opportunity to think about that now. The cold and sharp sword was pressed against her neck. Shangguan was terrified. She couldn't help but scream. "Chu Luiyue, I'm the third princess of the Tianling dynasty, and I have the Shangguan bloodline. You dare to kill me?" Chu Luiyue looked at her from above, raised her brows slightly, and lightly said, "This Long Yuan sword is stained with the blood of many Tianling royal family members. It doesn't matter whether you're there or not. Do you really think you're a big shot?" Shangguan's heart skipped a beat. She had never entered the Tianling god realm, so she didn't know the exact situation inside. However, Chu Luiyue said that the Long Yuan sword had killed someone from the royal family before. How was that possible? One had to know that this was left behind by the Taizu. "You're spouting nonsense." Shangguan originally wanted to curse out loud, but the Long Yuan sword was pressed against her neck, so she didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Her voice also became much weaker. However, she couldn't take it lying down. She was forced to kneel on the ground and look up at Chu Luiyue. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with jealousy. "Chu Luiyue, so what if you're really Shangguan? Your physical body was completely destroyed back then, and this body doesn't belong to you in the first place, right? Even if your soul is still here, it's already a completely different body now. The bloodline flowing in your body is ultimately from a fallen family of a small empire outside the heaven's canopy. What does it have to do with my Shangguan family?" At this point, Shangguan seemed to have suddenly realized something and sneered. Shangguan back then had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian and was a peak stage 8 warrior. And now, other than this consciousness that still exists, from head to toe, what other part of your body is worthy of the title of Empress? You want to take back everything that originally belonged to you? Why don't you take a look at the current you and see if you have the right to do so? After saying that, she looked at Shangguan, who was standing on the 9th step. "Father, I may have done something wrong, but I'm ultimately a descendant of the Shangguan family. And this woman in front of me has nothing to do with the Tianling royal family anymore. Father, aren't you afraid that her current body and bloodline will taint the legacy of the Shangguan family?" Shangguan was so hysterical that she didn't even care about the Long Yuan sword on her neck. In any case, today had already come to this point, and she definitely wouldn't be able to survive. In that case, there was nothing for her to worry about. As long as she could make Chu Luiyue lose everything, she wouldn't hesitate to pay any price. This hoarse scream spread throughout the entire square. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. Shangguan Wan's words weren't completely unreasonable. The person standing there now was Shangguan Yu, but she was also Chu Luiyue. Everything else was fine, but the problem with her bloodline was indeed not easy to solve. Many people secretly looked at Shangguan Yu, who was standing above, to see what kind of reaction and attitude he would have towards this. After this period of buffer, Shangguan Yu's mood had calmed down a lot. When he heard Shangguan Wan's words, he frowned slightly, and his eyes darkened. There's only one you in this world. Shangguan Wan's heart sank, and the smug and crazy look in her eyes suddenly froze. Then she couldn't help but sneer. Father, if you really disregard everything and acknowledge her again, you'll be letting down our ancestors. You may be willing, but our ancestors might not be. The current her is simply not worthy of being a member of the Shangguan family. As soon as she finished speaking, a deep voice that seemed to have traveled through time and space sounded between heaven and earth. Who said she's not worthy? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 893. His voice was majestic and awe-inspiring. It instantly enveloped the entire area. It was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat, and they subconsciously looked up. They saw that the void between the dark sky and earth was cleansed, and ripples were everywhere. Then a tall figure slowly appeared. It was like an illusion, but it also carried an unparalleled pressure. It made people subconsciously submit to him. Some people standing nearby could no longer withstand the pressure. Their legs went soft and they almost knelt down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at him with different reactions. Shock, astonishment, uneasiness. Excitement, reverence, and admiration. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was wearing a long, dark green robe. He was tall, straight, and elegant. His body was translucent, and he looked like a soul. There were no force fluctuations around him, but just by standing there, he exuded an aura of nobility that was ingrained in his bones. Just when countless people were wondering who this person was, Shangguan Yu was the first to react. He widened his eyes in shock and exclaimed, "Master, you're so powerful." He exclaimed, "Taizu." This voice directly caused everyone to be stunned on the spot. Taizu, Taizu. There was only one person in the world who could make Shangguan Yu call him that, the founder of the Tianling dynasty, Taizu Shangguanjing. But didn't he pass away a long time ago? Rumor had it that he passed away in the Tianling god realm. Why did he appear now? Taizu looked down, and his gaze became gentler. You're Shangguan Yu? Judging from his attitude toward you, or just now, he's not bad. Originally, Taizu still had some complaints about Shangguan Yu. They felt that he had a lot to do with the current situation. However, seeing that he seemed to be full of love and care for you, Taizu's dissatisfaction lessened a lot. Even his attitude toward Shangguan Yu improved a lot. In an instant, the natural intimacy that originated from the bloodline made Shangguan Yu believe that the person in front of him was indeed Taizu. He couldn't hide his excitement and immediately knelt down to kowtow. Junior Shangguan Yu greets Taizu. Since His Majesty had knelt, the rest of the people could only follow suit. Everyone in front of and behind Lang Kun Hall also hurriedly knelt down. Greetings, Taizu. There were too many people, and when they shouted in unison, their shouts shook the sky. Get up. Taizu's deep voice sounded. At the same time, everyone felt a gentle force lift them up. That is the power of Taizu. Many people were secretly shocked. It was rumored that Taizu was at the peak of the 9th stage, only a step away from the peri-celestial stage. Looking at it now, it was indeed worthy of its reputation. Just this move alone was enough to easily crush everyone present. Elder Chen Ku and the others were all moved, tears welling up in their eyes. Taizu. It's really Taizu. As elders of the royal family, they were considered the most loyal servants of the Tianling royal family. Now that they were able to see Taizu with their own eyes, it wasn't hard to imagine how excited they were. Taizu's gaze landed on Yuan Wei and the others, and he sighed softly. This is the child of the Yuan family, right? He looks very similar to Mingchen. Yuan Mingchen was the ancestor of the Yuan family. Yuan Wei was in fear and trepidation. Yuan Wei greets Taizu. There were very few clans that remained standing after 1,000 years, and they were still loyal to the Tianling dynasty to this day. It was indeed very rare. Taizu nodded. Everyone present, whether it was the officials in the imperial court or the people from the sects, had actually yet to recover from their shock. The hall was very quiet. In front of such a supreme figure, everyone subconsciously kept quiet and was incomparably respectful. Among them, only Shangguan was shocked. She knelt on the ground and looked at everything in a daze. Her mind was blank. Her limbs were numb, and her heart skipped a beat. All the blood in her body seemed to have frozen at this moment. Just now, when Taizu appeared, he said something. He said, "She's not worthy?" Was he speaking up for Chu Luiwei? Could it be that even Taizu was helping Chu Luiwei? Just as she was filled with doubts, she saw Taizu move and land beside the Tianling scepter. Although Shangguan Yu was also standing beside it, compared to him, his aura was instantly much weaker. Taizu was Taizu. There was no need to say anything. He just stood there, and he was the absolute king. After he landed, he first glanced at the Tianling scepter and shook his head. "It's been so many years. Why are you still so impulsive like a child?" He had clearly seen the Tianling scepter's performance just now. The Tianling scepter was shining brightly, and it seemed to be very righteous. It had helped him guard the Tianling dynasty for so many years, and it was bored to death. "Why won't you let me exercise my muscles?" Taizu laughed. He couldn't do anything about it. He turned to look at Chu Luiwei and waved. "Girl, come here." As soon as he said that, countless people's tense expressions cracked again. Who was Taizu calling just now? Chu Luiwei. Moreover, his tone was clearly very intimate and doting. Even the way he treated Shangguan Yu just now was far from this. Chu Luiwei blinked. Originally, she didn't want to trouble Taizu. After all, this was her own matter, and she could rely on her own ability to solve it. In fact, Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan had indeed been exposed, and there was no room for them to struggle. However, Shangguan words just now had clearly provoked Taizu. She glanced at Shangguan, who was kneeling on the floor, from the corner of her eye. She found that Shangguan's face was as pale as a ghost and her eyes were unfocused, as if she had suffered a huge blow. Her energy and thoughts were all exhausted. Chu Luiwei put away the long yuan sword and walked forward. Countless gazes followed her as she walked, as if they were afraid of missing something. Chu Luiwei walked to the bottom of the 9 steps, stood still, and bowed. "Taizu." Taizu waved again. "Come up." Chu Luiwei hesitated. Ordinary people couldn't climb these 9 steps. Under normal circumstances, only the emperor could stand on it. Although she had already revealed her identity, Taizu and her father were both here. If she went up, after thinking for a moment, she finally lifted her foot and went up. Unlike Shangguan, who had encountered many obstacles when she went up, Chu Luiwei climbed up the steps with incomparable ease. Her feet seemed to be riding the wind. Everyone only saw the corners of her clothes fluttering, and then she was already standing on the 9 steps. Although I haven't appeared in 1,000 years, I should have some say in the matters of the Tianling dynasty, right? Taizu said with a smile and glanced at Shangguan. "Just now, you said that if I accept you, it will cause dissatisfaction with the ancestors of the Tianling dynasty?" Shangguan trembled like a sieve, and her face was pale. "Then today I will announce to the world. She is the most outstanding junior of the Shangguan clan. Not only will she be the princess, but even the future emperor will also be her. I want to see which bastard dares to jump out and say, no." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveNet. Chapter 894. Taizu had personally announced that he would become the emperor. Such a thing had never happened before, and it would probably never happen again in the future. To allow Taizu to reappear in the world and protect him in every way possible, not to mention the previous things, Just this alone was enough to secure Chu Liyue's position as the emperor of Tianling. Shangguan felt as if she had been struck by lightning. The last glimmer of hope in her eyes completely disappeared. How could this be? How could this be? Shangguan should have died 2 years ago. How could she still come back? How could she still receive the support of so many people after destroying everything that she had worked so hard to obtain? Even the great ancestor was supporting her like this? Since Taizu had already spoken, what else could others say? Shangguan knew that her last bargaining chip was useless, and her heart was dead. She slowly raised her head and looked at Chu Liyue, who was standing in front of her. She was stunned for a while before she couldn't help but chuckle. Her face was filled with despair and mockery. No wonder you were so bold. So you still had this last trump card? Shangguan, you're ruthless. Who can be your opponent? Who can? If only she had known this would happen. She thought that she had won, but in the end, she had suffered a crushing defeat. She had become a joke to the world. At this point, she really didn't have any chance of turning the tables. Jianghu, who was not far away, frowned when he saw Taizu. The situation today was worse than he had expected. Even Chu Liyue himself was shocked. He couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly as he looked at Taizu. Taizu, she knew that Taizu was speaking up for her, but to give such a promise, it was indeed far beyond her expectations. You deserve this. Taizu shook his head gently and said affirmatively. Whether it's your talent, strength, or character, they are all impeccable. It's the blessing of Tianling to have you. Taizu said this with incomparable sincerity. If it weren't for Chu Liyue, he would still be trapped in the Tianling god realm, unable to see the light of day. As time passed, his final soul would very likely dissipate without a trace. The Dragon Abyss Sword has recognized you as its new master, and the Tianling scepter has also recognized you. In this world, there is no one more suitable than you to stand here. There were many people who could obtain the recognition of the Tianling scepter, but she was the only owner of the Long Yuan sword. Now, you can be considered to have inherited my mantle. Why can't you immediately take over the Heaven's Writ? Chu Liyue coughed and glanced at his imperial father. Unexpectedly, Shangguan also agreed with him. Taizu is right. Her had been very intelligent since she was young, and she had handled the affairs of the imperial court extremely well. Originally, when she was about to get married 2 years ago, I had planned to pass the throne to her. I didn't expect. A hint of darkness flashed across his face, but it was fleeting. Now that has returned safely, everything will naturally return to the right track. Father's body is weak, and I haven't fully recovered. There are indeed some things that I can't handle. Why don't you officially ascend the throne today? Chu Liyue was confused. Why did these two people casually push her to the throne with just a few words? This doesn't seem too appropriate. The corners of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched. What's inappropriate about it? There are many happy events today, and one more is even better. Taizu waved his hand. Everyone's expression became a little strange when they heard that. Many happy events. Taizu, open your eyes and take a closer look at the mess on the ground. Third Princess Shangguan and her newly married husband, Jianghu, are still covered in blood at this very moment. With the imperial family's dispute having reached this point, only you can say something like, there will be many happy things to come. The corners of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched, and he couldn't resist the attacks of the two for a moment. Shangguan clenched his fist and coughed. Look at father's body. I have to rest well. Can you bear to let father tire himself out? Chu Liyue was confused. Weren't you also strategizing when you were lying in bed for 2 years? Why don't we clean up this mess first? Chu Liyue glanced at the two of them and asked. The matter of Jianghu and Shangguan hadn't been completely settled yet. That's true, I almost forgot about this. Taizu clapped his hands and immediately looked down. Other than these two, Xiahou Rong and the others just now, who else harmed you back then? Who betrayed you? Today, drag them out and deal with them together. Taizu could be said to be swift and decisive. However, Chu Liyue's brows furrowed slightly. She had basically investigated what happened back then. However, there were still some questions that she was still puzzled about. For example, why did Jianghu do this? He clearly didn't like Shangguan Wan, or rather, whoever he liked wouldn't affect any of his decisions at all. In his heart, he only cared about himself. But why was he so painstakingly scheming for? There were so many people back then. Some stood firm for her, some ran for her, and some... Did they really betray her completely? She couldn't help but look in a certain direction. Mu Qinghe stood outside the crowd. His black armor was exceptionally eye-catching. As if sensing her gaze, Mu Qinghe also looked over. Mu Qinghe. Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke. Hearing this, everyone quieted down and looked at the two of them curiously and uneasily. Who didn't know that the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, Mu Qinghe, was personally groomed and promoted by the Empress back then? Something happened to the Empress, but the Black Cavalry didn't react at all. There was something wrong with it. Chu Luiyue looked at him with a solemn gaze and asked word by word, "Say it yourself, back then, did you betray me or not?" Digression. Thank you for all your rewards and tickets. I'm working hard to write in February. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 895. A clear and powerful voice spread throughout the entire Langquan Hall. Everyone watched this scene silently and subconsciously held their breaths. It was fine if the others colluded with Jianghu and Shangguan Wan to frame the princess. After all, each of them had their own goals. However, Mu Qinghe was different. Everything he had today was thanks to the Empress concubine. Without the princess, there would be no deputy commander of the Black Cavalry, Mu Qinghe. After all, he was once one of the princess's most trusted confidants. If he really betrayed the princess, he would not be able to escape death today. Furthermore, he would suffer thousands of curses after death. But if he didn't, what exactly happened to the princess's death back then? Countless pairs of eyes were focused on Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe raised his head and looked at the woman standing on the 9th step. His mind was in a mess. So, it was really her. No wonder he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity from the first time he saw her in country Yaochen. Later on, he was even worried about her matters several times. Even though he sensed that she seemed to be overly cold and polite to him, he didn't think too much about it. He thought that it was just because of the similar eyebrows. But in reality, now that he thought about it, it wasn't the appearance that was similar. It was clearly the aura and expression. He glanced sideways at Hong Yao, who was on his shoulder. "You already knew, right?" Hong Yao's eyes flickered as it buried its head under its wings. Actually, it didn't mean to hide it from him, but, however, Mu Qinghe didn't have any intention of scolding it. Instead, he slowly exhaled. The next moment, he walked forward and stood in the middle. Then, he raised his head slightly again and looked at Chu Luiyue, who was standing in front of him. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to be gripped by something, and her entire body tensed up. She could treat other people's betrayals as a thing of the past after she took her revenge, but she still felt a little indignant about Mu Qinghe. She didn't understand where the taciturn, stubborn, and loyal Mu Qinghe from back then had gone. So today, she only wanted an answer. She wanted him to say it himself. After a short stalemate, Mu Qinghe suddenly threw the sword in his hand to the side, making a crisp sound. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows moved slightly. Then she saw Mu Qinghe take off the armor on his body. As today was Shangguan Wan's wedding and ascension ceremony, everything was very grand. Even Mu Qinghe was fully armed and wearing the highest armor of the Black Cavalry's deputy general. At this moment, he took off his black armor. He felt his body. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Then, he knelt down in front of Chu Luiyue. His knee hit the ground with a dull thud. "Your Highness," he suddenly bent down and kowtowed. His forehead was pressed against the cold jade floor. A cold chill almost spread through his entire body. "Mu Qinghe betrayed your Highness and is a vile subject. Your Highness, please kill him." Every single word and sentence was clear as day. No one present expected Mu Qinghe to have such a reaction. He didn't argue, complain, or protest. With just one sentence, he admitted his betrayal so straightforwardly. In the current situation, wasn't he courting death? As long as he said that he didn't betray, or that he was forced, there might be a way out. But he didn't. If it was 2 years ago, who would have thought that Mu Qinghe, who was the most trusted by the princess, would come to this step today? If he had always been loyal to the princess, after today, when the princess took over the imperial power and ascended to the throne, he would be a first-class meritorious official. Unfortunately, Jianghu glanced at him, a dark light flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He quickly lowered his eyes, hiding the expression in his eyes. Chu Luiyue looked at Mu Qinghe, who was kneeling below, with a calm and cold gaze. Everyone looked at her. This time, Mu Qinghe should only have a dead end left. In the silence, Chu Luiyue spoke again and asked, "What you said now, is every word true?" "Yes." "No lies, no difficulties?" "No." "Are you willing to die?" Mu Qinghe was still kneeling there. Previously, he had been lowering his head, but when he heard this, he finally straightened up. His face was calm. "Your Highness, please grant my wish." Every word and sentence indicated that he was ready to die. Chu Luiyue paused, then suddenly smiled. "The last time you asked this consort to grant your wish, it was to go to Dahuang Swamp. At that time, although her status was respected, her power in the imperial court was not stable. Mu Qinghe took the initiative to go to Dahuang Swamp to enlist in the army, to fight for military power for her. At first, she did not agree. Dahuang Swamp was very dangerous. If he went there, he would suffer a lot. More importantly, he might not even be able to keep his life. He was always walking between life and death. If he was not careful, he might stay there forever. However, that was the only time that Mu Qinghe did not listen to her order and knelt outside her palace for a long time. At that time, he also said, "Your Highness, please grant my wish." However, she did not expect to hear these words a few years later. He was actually asking for death. When Mu Qinghe heard this, his heart felt like it was stabbed by something. It was so painful that his body trembled slightly. His expression was gloomy for a moment, but he quickly lowered his head. "Your Highness, please." The remaining 2 words were stuck in his throat and he could not say them. Chu Luiyue looked at him and sighed softly. In that case, before she finished speaking, she suddenly saw Hong Yao, who was on Mu Qinghe's shoulder, flapping its wings anxiously. It flew around Mu Qinghe and got closer from time to time. It let out a rapid chirp as if it was saying something. Or, it was trying to persuade her. However, Mu Qinghe was unmoved. Seeing this, Hong Yao was so anxious that it turned around and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Everyone saw a ball of blue flames streaking across the sky. In the next second, they saw that Mu Qinghe's blue sparrow had already flown in front of Chu Luiyue. It flapped its wings and looked nervously at Chu Luiyue, as if it wanted to say something. It was so anxious that tears kept welling up in its eyes. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and she reached out her hand. "Hong Yao." Before her hand could touch Hong Yao, Mu Qinghe, who was below, suddenly realized something. He straightened up and shouted with a frown, his tone warning. Hong Yao's body trembled slightly, but it still fell into Chu Luiyue's hands. Big drops of tears rolled down, wetting its fluffy feathers and falling into Chu Luiyue's palm, which was slightly hot. Chu Luiyue could clearly see that its eyes were filled with grievance and pleading. No. At some point, Dumpling had also come out and squatted on Chu Luiyue's shoulder, watching this scene. It was rare that it did not make a fuss with Hong Yao this time. After hesitating for a moment, it flew over and circled around Hong Yao, seeming to be at a loss. After a while, it used its head to clumsily and carefully nudge Hong Yao's head. "Don't cry." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 896. He was used to Hong Yao's willful and spoiled appearance, but this was the first time he saw Hong Yao like this. Seeing that Hong Yao's tears were still flowing, Dumpling flapped its wings in annoyance and raised its head to look at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue sighed in his heart and reached out to wipe away Hong Yao's tears. Alright, don't cry anymore. I won't kill him. At this moment, everyone was focused on this side. When they heard this, they were all stunned on the spot. What did this mean? The Empress concubine was not going to kill Mu Qinghe because of that cyan sparrow. After a moment, whispers finally came from the crowd. It can't be, the Empress concubine really doesn't plan to kill Mu Qinghe? Just for that cyan sparrow. There's something you don't know. Although that cyan sparrow is Mu Qinghe's contracted magical beast, it was actually raised by the Empress concubine most of the time. I heard that the Empress concubine pampers it as much as her own magical beast. If Mu Qinghe dies, then this cyan sparrow obviously won't be able to live either. But even so, the Empress concubine's contracted magical beast is a mythical beast. Why would she care about this little cyan sparrow? Who can guess the Empress concubine's thoughts? But that Mu Qinghe, her luck is really good. She actually relied on this contracted magical beast to save her life. Most people were shocked by this, but this was the Empress concubine's matter after all. It was her freedom to deal with it however she wanted. Mu Qinghe betrayed her, but she didn't plan to kill her. What qualifications did others have to say? Chu Luiyue raised his eyes and looked at Mu Qinghe. From today onwards, Mu Qinghe will be stripped of her position as the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry. She will be grounded in the Mu residence. Without my permission, she is not allowed to leave the residence, and no one is allowed to visit her. Jian Fengqi's hanging heart finally relaxed and he let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, otherwise he didn't know how to plead for mercy for her, but he also felt that something was wrong. Why did he have to ask for death for no reason? When he had the chance, he still had to go and ask. Mu Qinghe was stunned. He thought that what awaited him was a dead end, but he didn't expect. Immediately, a hint of struggle flashed through his eyes, as if he wanted to say something. Your Highness, take him away. At Chu Luiyue's command, a black cavalry immediately stepped forward and suppressed Mu Qinghe. It was a tall and sturdy man. Just now, no one had noticed his existence. Now that he had stood up, everyone was shocked to realize that this person's aura was extremely strong. Mu Qinghe frowned. She turned around and saw a familiar face. It was Lei Laosi. He had unknowingly infiltrated the Black Cavalry without anyone noticing. Yoshii, thank you for your hard work. Chu Luiyue said. Mitsui chuckled. Your Highness can rest assured about what I do. Everyone was stunned. Yoshii? Isn't that the one ranked 4th in the 13 U-Guards? When did the 13 U-Guards actually return to Xiling? And no one noticed that something was wrong. Previously, Jiang Yuqing had spent a lot of manpower and resources to hunt down the 13 U-Guards. He didn't expect that not only did he not manage to kill them, but they all followed the princess back to Xiling. Jiang Yuqing frowned even more. As expected, the 13 U-Guards had already changed their identities and returned. Previously, when Xiahou Rong mentioned that the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill was stolen, he faintly felt that something was wrong. Afterward, he had also sent people to search the city, but they didn't find anything. He didn't expect that they would directly infiltrate the palace today. All of this was clearly planned by Chu Luiyue long ago. She had made up her mind to completely turn the tables today and not leave any way out for them. Jiang Yuqing frowned as he kept thinking about the future. The 13 U-Guards had returned, His Majesty had woken up, and even the Taizu had appeared. This was practically a dead end. If he wanted to break out from here, he had to think of another way. Mu Qinghe was completely suppressed by Mitsui. She couldn't say a word as she was taken down just like that. Hong Yao nestled on Chu Luiyue's shoulder and looked at him reluctantly before quickly looking away. When she passed by Jiang Yuqing looked up and gave Mu Qinghe a meaningful look. Mu Qinghe's heart skipped a beat, and a hint of worry flashed across her eyes. Father! Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke. Shangguan Wan has usurped the throne and is sinister and ruthless. She deserves to be punished. What do you think? Although Shangguan Wan has committed many crimes, it's still better to get father's approval to sentence her to death. Shangguan Yu frowned and looked at Shangguan Wan with a heavy gaze. As if sensing something, Shangguan suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness in her heart. Actually, she didn't want to die yet. Father, I did those wrong things in a moment of confusion, but I was also instigated by others. Please let me go this time. Shangguan begged for mercy. Shangguan shook his head. For what you have done in the past 2 years, even if you die 100 times, it won't be enough. The Tianling royal family doesn't have a descendant like you. Shangguan's heart suddenly sank. From today onwards, you are no longer worthy of being a member of the Shangguan family. You can't enter the imperial mausoleum after death. Your birth mother was born lowly and was just an orphan, so you won't implicate the people of your mother's family. However, the servants of Huayang Palace and Qingfeng Palace will also be executed. I'll take it that I've never had a daughter like you. With every word that Shangguan said, Shangguan's face turned paler. In the end, she knelt on the ground, completely paralyzed, and her face was ashen. This was to completely erase her from the Tianling royal family's records. Father! She knelt forward, but Elder Chen Ku immediately waved his sleeve and stopped her. How dare you! Shangguan's body flew backward and landed heavily on the ground. She was already injured, and this hit was like a heavy blow to her, causing her to spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. Shangguan raised her hand, wanting to wipe away the blood at the corner of her mouth. When she looked down, the bright red color on her body instantly pierced her eyes. She suddenly remembered that today was her wedding day. She was still wearing the phoenix coronet embroidered with gold. In fact, he was originally only a step away from the emperor's throne. She thought that after today, she would become the most honorable woman in the entire Tianling dynasty. But now, all of that was gone. So many years of hard work had all gone up in smoke overnight. Shangguan's heart was filled with hatred. She was filled with resentment and jealousy, almost burning her up. A black talisman was faintly discernible between her eyebrows. Nothing at all. And that woman. Who cares if she's Chu Luiyue or Shangguan? In any case, she had taken everything away from her. Now that she was high and mighty, she was really smug. Shangguan slowly raised her head, stared at Chu Luiyue, and spat out a sentence. What you have is already too much. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She vaguely felt that something was wrong with Shangguan. The next moment, she saw Shangguan's aura suddenly rise. Then, a black blade cut across the sky and went straight for Chu Luiyue. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. Chapter 897. In fact, when they saw Chu Luiyue holding on for a long time, they were relieved and happy. But now, wasn't it too long? This made them worried again. Jian Fengji glanced at Dumpling beside him, and a sharp light flashed in his icy eyes. He leaned against the stone wall and chuckled. Don't worry. She won't let herself die so easily. Back then, she was framed by Shangguan and Jianghu. She had chosen to commit suicide, but in the end she survived and started over again. How could she be so easy to deal with? Let's take advantage of this time to digest all the force that we devoured before. This way, we might not be too far behind her. Otherwise, Jian Fengji raised his eyebrows. Although he didn't finish his sentence, his meaning was obvious. Yuan Jinghong glanced at him in bewilderment. Are you sure? After all, it's infused with divine power. A pervert will always be a pervert. Jian Fengji said straightforwardly. He looked at the slender figure on the main peak in the distance and closed his eyes. The force around his body surged. Seeing him like this, the rest of the people looked at each other and had no choice but to suppress their thoughts for the time being. They began to cultivate like Jian Fengji. No matter what, there were many benefits to increasing one's strength. The few of them temporarily calmed down, but the others around ancient Phoenix Mountain weren't so easy to calm down. They thought that Shangguan wouldn't be able to hold on for long and would be defeated soon. But for some reason, it actually held on for so long. From afar, the endless golden light in the sky surrounded Jun Jiuqing and Shangguan, forming two centers respectively. Although the scale and movements of Shangguan Yu's side could not be compared to Jun Jiuqing's at this time, but compared to the beginning, it was much stronger and was obviously still expanding. Not only was she not at a disadvantage, she even seemed to be catching up. How is this possible? Many people had the same question in their hearts as they watched this scene. Chu Luiyue had no idea about the reactions of the outside world. This was because all of her energy was focused on regulating the origin power in her body. A cultivator's body was like a container. Depending on their strength and other aspects, the amount of origin power they could store would also differ greatly. Chu Luiyue was currently peak tier 6. Among cultivators of the same rank, he was absolutely considered one of the best. She had the Daijing Yuan Meridian. At the same time, her physical strength was much stronger than people of the same level. This allowed her to endure the surging origin power with greater endurance and acceptance than others. That was why she was able to hold on until now, exceeding the expectations of Yuan Jinghong and the others. Even so, at the end of the day, she was only at the peak of stage 6. Compared to Jun Jiuqing, the difference was too great. She dared to compete with Jun Jiuqing because the water droplet in her dantian could store an unlimited amount of origin power. However, at the same time, she was faced with a serious problem. Even if the water droplet could store all of the origin power, her body might not be able to withstand the repeated washing and impact of the vigorous origin power. In fact, not long after it started, her body started to hurt all over. Now that an hour had passed, the pain did not lessen. Instead, it became even worse. She even felt that the origin power had turned into sharp blades when it surged into her limbs and bones, ruthlessly scraping through her flesh and bones. The others were far away and could not see that her clothes were already soaked in blood. Even the lower part of her body was dyed red with blood. Compared to Chu Luiyue, Jun Jiuqing's situation was undoubtedly much better. His strength was more than one level higher than Chu Luiyue's, and he had the bloodline of the Dark North royal family. It could be said that he had all the advantages. Even until now, he was still suspended in midair and had not been swept down by the terrifying energy. His strength and determination were evident from this. The aura around him was also increasing rapidly with the passage of time. Of course, he could also clearly feel that a small portion of the energy that was supposed to belong to him was diverted halfway and swallowed by another person. He originally thought that it would end soon, but he did not expect it to not stop after so long. Therefore, Jun Jiuqing lowered his eyes and took a look. With this look, he could clearly see Chu Luiyue sitting cross-legged and bathed in blood. A fierce look flashed across his eyes. His body moved and landed not far away from Chu Luiyue. "Do you want to die?" His face was cold and his voice was icy. "In order to defeat you are willing to give up your life?" Chu Luiyue laughed softly. "You think too much. I am not doing this to defeat you." She was doing this to defeat the remnant consciousness in the divine energy. Since it felt that she was a threat, then she would show it. The red in Jun Jiuqing's eyes grew brighter and brighter, almost as if they were soaked in blood. Then he laughed coldly. "Based on your current strength, you want to compete with I?" Chu Luiyue slowly turned her head and glanced at him. She was still smiling, but the bright red blood stain at the corner of her mouth made her smile even more stubborn and tenacious. "Based on my strength, can't?" Her voice was very soft, but her tone was still arrogant and proud. It was as if there was nothing in this world that she could not do. Jun Jiuqing put one hand behind his back and slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. He could roughly guess that she wanted to increase her strength as quickly as possible, but this was too risky. What was it that gave her such confidence? Jun Jiuqing's gaze swept across her pale face and laughed ambiguously. However, there was no smile at the corner of his eyes. "Since you want to compete, I will let you lose completely." After he finished speaking, the force in his body surged and his cultivation level increased again. The golden origin power in the surroundings surged toward him. The golden vortex above Chu Luiyue's head gradually shrank. The force surrounding her also began to rush toward Jun Jiuqing at a speed visible to the naked eye. 9th rank warrior. Sensing this movement, Jian Fengqi opened his eyes and looked over. His expression was slightly serious. No wonder Jun Jiuqing had always been so arrogant in the northern underworld. This talent and strength could indeed be considered top-notch. Moreover, the most important thing was that this might not be his true strength. Seeing that almost all the force was rushing toward him, Chu Luwei appeared to be particularly weak. This was a battle where the outcome could be seen at a glance. How is that Jun Jiuqing so strong? Mu Hongyu could not help but stand up with an anxious expression. Actually, your Majesty has not suffered a loss. After all, you have devoured a lot of force before. Now, as long as you can return safely, everything else is. Your Majesty! Before Yuan Jinghong could finish his words, he suddenly opened his eyes wide in shock. On top of the mountain, an arrow suddenly flew out from the golden light that filled the sky. It went straight for Chu Luwei. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 898. With a clear shout, the dagger in the Lang Kuan Palace that was thousands of miles away flew forward and quickly killed the black stream of light. Golden sand and dust flew into the air. The wind howled. Shui Shui, who was following behind Rong Xiu, immediately shrank its neck and retreated. It had finally gotten the chance to take a shower a few days ago and cleaned up. It didn't want to be as sloppy as before. After a while, the surrounding wind and sand gradually calmed down, and the Red Moon Desert seemed to have returned to peace. Only the scorching sun continued to roast the earth, causing it to be scalding hot. Rong Xiu stopped in his tracks and looked up. In the vast desert, there was no one else except him. A childish and cold voice entered his ears. Someone bullied you, Rong Xiu paused, and a golden flame seemed to burn in his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. It's the Black Demon Cave. Why would the Black Demon Cave find her? This was Lan Zhao's voice. Why didn't they stay in their own territory? Why did they come to Tianling? Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly and he chuckled. That person's physical body was destroyed a few years ago. Now, only a soul is left, constantly residing in the bodies of cultivators and absorbing their cultivation to maintain its life. Whoosh! The yellow sand in front of him moved, and a blurry figure appeared in the lake. It looked like a 4- or 5-year-old child. You know that person? Du Gumabao asked. I've met him once. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and there was an unfathomable look in his deep phoenix eyes. I just didn't expect him to be so bold now. He even dared to touch you, Lan Xiao said lazily. Who cares why he went to Tianling? If he wants to touch you, he's going against us. Diwu, if I remember correctly, how much friendship do you have with the Black Demon Cave in the past? Don't talk nonsense. Diwu Zhangze immediately denied. I'm not close to them. Lan Xiao chuckled. Not close? If you're not close, why would they pay tribute to you for 10 years? I heard that the gifts they give you every year are piled up. Stop! Diwu Zhangze shouted with a headache. I was wrong, okay? Back then, I only thought that they went to ask for medicine. How would I know what they did in private? What's more, I didn't help them even once. Du Gumabao said coldly. You didn't help them because you're already trapped in the desert. If Diwu Zhangze hadn't come here, he would have been killed by the Black Demon Caves. Diwu Zhangze. What was this? He really had nothing to do with the Black Demon Cave. He had only agreed to meet them because of their 10 years of hard work. That meeting, he didn't do anything. So many years had passed. Who would have thought that this matter would be brought up again at this time? Then why don't I go find the people from the Black Demon Cave and warn them? Diwu Zhangze asked tentatively. Then he thought about it and found it strange. Logically speaking, the Black Demon Cave has no reason to bother Tianling. Is it because of something on the girl? She did have a few treasures. That person was expelled from the Black Demon Cave many years ago. Rong Xiu said indifferently. Du Gumabao and the others were surprised. Expelled? What did he do that even the Black Demon Cave can't tolerate? Du Gumabao asked immediately. Rong Xiu shook his head. That's what you need to ask that person. Then he moved his feet, and his figure quickly transformed into several shadows. After about a quarter of an hour, he finally stopped and stood at the center of the Red Moon Desert, beside the Blue Lake. He looked forward and smiled. Now, I've passed the 3 seniors test. According to the agreement, I can leave, right? Dugu Mabao snorted. You could have passed this test long ago. Why do you have to pretend to be troubled? From the strength he displayed at the last moment, it was clear that he had been concealing his strength before this. Rong Xiu smiled, slightly bent down, and politely bowed. He said humbly, "Actually, I just broke through not too long ago. It's all thanks to the senior's guidance. If not for the fact that I was lucky enough to cross the step, Rong Xiu would have been stuck here for a long time." "You're still pretending to be innocent after taking advantage of me." Lan Xiao couldn't help but scold. He wanted to make things difficult for this kid, but he didn't expect that not only did he not make him suffer, he even took the opportunity to help him break through. This was like throwing a rock to smash the other party's head to teach him a lesson, but he didn't expect to throw it right at the other party's feet and become his stepping stone. This feeling was extremely sullen. To think that he thought of so many ways to deal with Rong Xiu, but in the end, it was all for him. Rong Xiu was already immune to such words. From the day he got together with you, they didn't like him. Thus, Rong Xiu had been through a lot and could handle it easily. Also, I didn't take good care of you and made the seniors worry about her. It's my fault. Dugu Mabao and the others were silent for a moment. Even though they scolded him, they knew how Rong Xiu treated you. If there was any other way, he wouldn't want things to develop to this stage. After a while, ripples appeared on the surface of the water. Dugu Mabao said, "You can leave. If the girl gets hurt again, we won't let you off." Rong Xiu cupped his fists. "Seniors, take care. I'll take my leave." With that, he finally turned and left. Shui followed closely behind. The figures of a man and a beast soon disappeared into the void. The Red Moon Desert returned to peace again. After some time, Diwu Zhangze asked carefully, "If we let him go just like that, then what should we do next?" They couldn't leave the Red Moon Desert and could only come out once a month. What they wanted to do was very limited. Return to the imperial capital, but we couldn't help her much. If she can't even deal with those cats and dogs, then we were wrong about her. Dugu Mabao said coldly. "That's true, but the girl was bullied. Are we just going to watch?" Lan Xiao couldn't listen anymore and retorted disapprovingly. "Of course not." Dugu Mabao said slowly. "Don't worry, I have my own plans." West Hill, Palace, Lanquan Hall. The dagger flew out and completely strangled that black stream of light. Everything happened in an instant. Chu Luiwei didn't even see the dagger's movements clearly when he heard a shrill and resentful scream. Then, everything in front of him disappeared. That cold and threatening aura was also immediately removed. The totem on the dagger gradually dimmed and disappeared without a trace. Then, it flew back to Chu Luiwei's hand. Chu Luiwei blinked. That aura just now, it was Rong Xiu? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 899. Seeing the last black light escape, Chu Luiwei subconsciously wanted to continue attacking, but Taizu's voice suddenly sounded in her ears. Don't chase a cornered enemy. In just a moment, that thing left decisively. Chu Luiwei looked back strangely, but saw Taizu's expression was still solemn. Is he worried about the so-called Black Demon Cave? As the Empress, she had a basic understanding of the situation on the continent. Outside Heaven's Canopy, there were countless small countries like Yaochen. And inside Heaven's Canopy, there were mostly powerful existences like the Tianling dynasty. These empires usually had extremely vast territories, and most of them were responsible for guarding Heaven's Canopy. They could be said to be huge monsters on the continent. They also had connections and interactions with each other, but they basically didn't interfere with each other. After all, if this level of existence caused trouble, it would be the lives of millions of people. Moreover, empires that could occupy a place in heaven's canopy all had top-notch experts overseeing them. They couldn't be easily provoked. But Chu Luiwei had never heard of the Black Demon Cave. Taizu seemed to be a little afraid. What exactly was he worried about? But Taizu didn't seem to intend to talk about this in detail in front of everyone. He only gave Chu Luiwei a meaningful look and shook his head slightly. At this moment, a painful groan suddenly came from below. Shangguan was lying on the ground unknowingly. She was curled up into a ball in extreme pain, and there was a bloodstain that was continuously spreading. At a glance, it was faintly black. Pain. Extreme pain. Her mind was blank, and only the pain that she couldn't escape and couldn't avoid was left. Because that person rushed out of Shangguan's body without caring about anything, it caused her force to run amok. Now, her flesh and blood were festering, and some even revealed white bones. Her entire body felt like it was being roasted by a raging fire. It also felt like she was being ruthlessly cut by thousands of sharp blades. Shangguan was in so much pain that she felt dizzy. Today, she finally experienced what it meant to live a life worse than death. Seeing Shangguan's ghastly appearance, many people's faces revealed shock and disgust. They all retreated, afraid that they would be infected by something. Chu Luiwei looked at this scene coldly. Then she walked down the steps and stepped in front of Shangguan. The dragon sword returned to her hand, and the Tianling scepter also quietly followed by her side. Shangguan heard footsteps and knew that Chu Luiwei had arrived. Her curled up and trembling body finally stopped for a moment, and then she slowly raised her head. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. The scars on Shangguan's face started to fester one after another as well. Looked like a ghost? She to her to the twos to her was to her to the point. To her looked to was to look, to her face was like a malicious ghost. She was wearing a bright red wedding dress, so the blood on her body didn't make it obvious. Only the spreading bloodstains on her lower body showed how serious her injuries were at this moment. She raised her head with difficulty and looked at Chu Luiwei. Her eyes were filled with despair and desolation. At this moment, she didn't even have the strength to hate Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei looked at her. "What's your relationship with that person just now?" Shangguan opened her mouth. Her voice was weak. "Kill me." She knew that she wouldn't be able to survive today. That person just now had destroyed the last bit of life in her body. Now, her body was just a broken shell. She would rather die than suffer the disdain, ridicule, and abuse of countless people. However, Chu Luiwei was unmoved. She only bent down and stared into Shangguan's eyes. "Let me ask you, how much do you know about that person just now?" Shangguan dared to be so arrogant because she had the help of that person just now. Speaking of which, she should know the most about that person. Shangguan laughed at herself. However, before the corners of her mouth could curl up, they drooped down and her face became a little gloomier. Chu Luiwei took a step back and raised her chin. "Chi Han, wake her up." A figure walked out from the black cavalry again. It was Chi Han. He walked straight to Shangguan's side and pulled her hair, forcing her to raise her head. His other hand quickly stuffed a medicinal pill into her mouth. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water, straightforward and decisive. Before Shangguan could cry out in pain, she felt the warm medicinal effect spread between her chest and abdomen. However, this didn't make her feel happy or relieved. Instead, it triggered a deeper fear. She hurriedly struggled and wanted to spit out the medicinal pill. However, the medicinal pill melted in her mouth and she had already swallowed it. "Now, do you have the strength to speak?" Chu Luiwei asked indifferently. Shangguan's heart was filled with resentment and fear. She couldn't help but wail. "What do you want? I know you hate me. Kill me." She would rather die than suffer the pain of being trampled on and tortured in public. Chu Luiwei suddenly laughed. Her eyes were curved, but there was a hint of coldness in the corners of her eyes. "You want to die? How can there be such a good thing?" To be able to die quickly, in a sense, was also a relief. Shangguan had inflicted so much pain on her. How could she let her off so easily? Back then, She had chosen to commit suicide without hesitation because she couldn't bear the torture from the two of them. However, she didn't intend to give this opportunity to Shangguan. She blinked, looking at Shangguan as she said slowly and seriously, "You're right. Don't worry. Even if you don't want to say it now, you will say it sooner or later." Shangguan shuddered. In an instant, endless fear surged in her heart. I really don't know. I don't know anything." He appeared on his own. I was forced." Chu Luiwei suddenly shook her head. "Don't worry. Think it through and tell me the whole story again. Don't waste my time." Then, she tilted her head slightly and looked at Jiang Yuqing. She shook her head regretfully. "TSK, what a pity. Your husband didn't say a single word of mercy for you from start to finish." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 900. Shangguan was already numb. Jiang Yuqing did not treat her with sincerity. She was already clear about it. He couldn't wait to push all the blame onto her, so how could he still speak up for her? Now that she thought about it, the years of love she thought were just her own wishful thinking. This wedding ceremony that she had meticulously prepared and looked forward to had finally become a huge joke. Shangguan closed her eyes in despair. Her tears seemed to have dried up, leaving her heart empty and sorrowful. Immediately, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted. "Take her away and take care of her," Chu Luiwei said indifferently. "Yes." Chi Han hummed in response and quickly dragged Shangguan away, leaving behind a patch of scarlet bloodstains on the ground, indicating that something had happened here. Everyone looked at this scene in silence, and they all felt sorrow in their hearts. Who would have thought that Shangguan, who was so proud of her success, would end up like this overnight? From today onwards, the world was going to change completely. From the beginning to the end, there was one person who seemed to be indifferent to this, Jiang Yuqing. Even when he saw his newly married wife reduced to such a state, there was still no expression on his face, as if it had nothing to do with him. Only his blood-stained and empty sleeve reminded people that half of his arm had been chopped off. Chu Luiwei looked at Jiang Yuqing and flipped his wrist. Swoosh! The long yuan sword was pointed forward. The black blade was suffused with a cold light and emitted waves of chilling murderous intent. It was as if it could directly kill Jiang Yuqing in the next moment. "Now it's your turn." "Your Highness." A panicked and sorrowful cry was heard. Immediately, a figure suddenly rushed up from behind and stood in front of Jiang Yuqing. With a plop, he directly knelt on the ground. It was Jiang Lizhua. At this moment, the proud expression on his face had completely disappeared, leaving only a face full of panic. He knelt there and looked up at Chu Luiwei in despair. "Your Highness, please spare Yuqing's life." Chu Luiwei's eyes turned slightly, and he looked at him with amusement. "Grand Tutor Jiang, you should have heard and seen everything that happened just now. How can you still have the nerve to beg for mercy now?" Jiang Yuqing colluded with Shangguan to poison imperial father and this consort. Furthermore, he passed down a fake imperial edict, framed a loyal official, and even attempted to exterminate the entire Chongshu pavilion. Which of these actions wasn't a crime that deserved to be punished? Now you want this consort to spare him. Where does your confidence come from? Jiang Lizhua was drenched in cold sweat, his complexion pale. How could he not know how serious these sins were? However, Jiang Yuqing was his eldest son and the son he doted on the most. When he saw Jiang Yuqing's arm being chopped off previously, he almost couldn't help but jump out. However, he was also stunned by everything that happened back then, so he forcefully held it in. But hearing Chu Luiwei's meaning now, he clearly wanted Jiang Yuqing's life. How could he sit still? Yuqing has always liked you, so why would he harm you? Shangguan might hate you, but Yuqing doesn't. There must be a misunderstanding here. 2 years ago, when we were preparing for the wedding, Yuqing personally handled everything in the Jiang residence. He wanted to marry you smoothly more than anyone else, so why would he do those things afterward? Jiang Lizua knelt on the floor. Your Highness, Yuqing had already mentioned this to me many years ago. He has admired you for many years, so he definitely wouldn't betray you. Chu Liyue's lips curved up slightly. This means that I remembered wrongly the person who killed me? Jiang Lizua was stumped. Perhaps he was forced, Grand Tutor Jiang. Chu Liyue interrupted him with a calm expression. Don't just beg for mercy for your son. You should also beg for your entire Jiang family. Jiang Lizua was suddenly dazed upon hearing this. Jiang Yuqing has committed many crimes. Do you think that the Jiang family can completely wash off all of this? Just the fact that he tried to harm father is enough to wipe out the entire family. You can't even protect yourself now, so why do you still have the energy to beg for mercy for Jiang Yuqing? Chu Liyue reminded him kindly. If you really want to cry, why don't you cry for your entire Jiang family first? Jiang Lizua really didn't think of this. Too many things happened today, and the impact was too great, so he didn't think of this at all. When he saw Shangguan Wan's pitiful appearance earlier, he was afraid that Jiang Yuqing would end up in the same state. Hence, he hurriedly rushed out. But he didn't expect that the entire Jiang family would be implicated by Jiang Yuqing. Chu Liyue's words were like a blow to the head, and it made Jiang Lizua suddenly wake up. His dry and pale lips trembled violently, and his eyes were in a daze. Then, immense fear surged out from his eyes. That's right. This is a huge crime that implicates the entire family. If the previous evidence wasn't sufficient, there was still room for rebuttal. But now, the princess and His Majesty have personally stepped forward to prove that the incident back then was indeed Jiang Yuqing's doing. What else is there to argue about? Yuqing, quickly say something. Jiang Lizua instinctively looked at Jiang Yuqing. This son has been my pride since he was young, and he is always the most outstanding in all aspects. Later on, he was even more delighted when he agreed on the marriage with the princess. There are so many young talents in the Tianling dynasty, but the princess chose Yuqing. This is something that others can't be envious of. He originally thought that everything would proceed smoothly, but he didn't expect the princess to suddenly die, and the marriage was ruined. Jiang Lizua was originally very disappointed, but Jiang Yuqing actually gradually became close to Shangguan Wan again. Moreover, as he had previously helped the princess settle many things, he took the opportunity to take over these matters after the princess died and rapidly became a powerful figure in the entire Tianling dynasty. Regarding this, Jiang Lizua was naturally happy. He didn't ask anything in detail and only felt that this son was very capable. Thus, he peacefully enjoyed the crowd's admiration and envy. Who would have thought that he actually did all these things in secret? Now that the truth has been revealed, there's no way to avoid it. Not only did the glory and wealth disappear in the blink of an eye, but even the entire Jiang family was implicated. Jiang Yuqing didn't seem to care about Jiang Lizua's scolding and pleading. He looked at Chu Liyue. Other than the initial shock, his emotions seemed to have calmed down. I didn't expect you to still be alive. Once Jiang Yuqing spoke, Jiang Lizua instantly slumped to the ground, and his face turned ashen. He admitted it. Chu Liyue's red lips curved up slightly. Yes, I'm still alive. Are you very disappointed? Jiang Yuqing didn't answer her, and his expression became a little strange. That person helped you, right? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.